Hi, I'm Sarah,
And I'm Tess.
and this is the Basically Bookish podcast.
Today, we're stepping inside the shadowy world of One Dark Window by Rachel Gillig, a dark fantasy dripping with Gothic vibes, sinister magic, and dangerous bargains.
You read the title. Today we are breaking down the entire plot of the book. This episode will be really heavy on spoilers, so if you don't want the ending spoiled, go and finish the first book and we'll be here when you're done.
Or if you just need a quick refresher before you read the next book in the series, Two Twisted Crowns, we are so happy to help.
At the end of this episode, we'll be sharing some early thoughts on the sequel, Two Twisted Crowns, and why we think this series is about to get even darker.
If you love morally gray characters, cursed kingdoms, and just the right touch of Gothic horror, you're in the right place.
Subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or YouTube, and follow us on all the socials under @BasicallyBookishPod so you never miss a deep dive.
All right, let's get into it.
This is going to be fun. To the quiet girls with stories in their heads, to the dreams and the nightmares. Welcome to the magical kingdom of Blunder, and our protagonist's name is Elspeth Spindle. The book opens up with a song or a poem on what looks like a tarot card or a playing card, and it's like that for every chapter. So in the first chapter, it says, "The infection comes as a fever in the night. If you take ill, watch the veins. If they remain as they ever did, you have nothing to fear. If the blood turns black, the infection has taken hold." So our main protagonist, Elspeth, was infected at 9 years old. And when you are infected, physicians come and check you out and they take you. And at first, in the beginning, we don't really know where they're taken. They're just taken away. And the opening is very disorienting. And I think it's meant to be that way. You're kind of, I think Tess described it as being plopped down in the center of this very mystical, dark Gothic world. And that's exactly what's happening. So Elspeth was infected and the physicians come to take her, but her aunt quickly throws her, like chucks her out of a window. And she falls onto her head. And she's like pretty messed up after this. But she's wandering to the edge of the woods to try to hide from them. But she doesn't make it. She hits her head really hard. And so she kind of like passes out on the edge of the woods. And she says this next part is a dream, or maybe a dream. She's not really sure. But she says that the mist comes and it enters her body. And from then on, she has this presence in her mind. It's a voice, and she calls him the nightmare. So she wakes up under an alder tree and bears none of the typical symptoms of magic, no new abilities, no strange sensations. So she thinks herself spared. And right off the bat, it's unclear when the nightmare entered. But I had to go back and read it because I was really unsure about, was it the mist that entered her? Was it later? I was really confused.
So I'm not sure if I'm just getting ahead of myself, but are you
Sure.
still confused about where he came from?
I know where he comes from. She calls him the nightmare even before she touches the card. Like if
Right,
you go into the,
because
yeah,
okay.
Do you know why?
So my understanding is that the first time she saw the nightmare card, she touched it, and then that's when he entered her, because she has this fear later on of touching or using any of the other Providence cards because she's afraid that she's going to absorb their
Right.
essence as well. So I
Yeah.
think that
Yeah, I figured that's when the nightmare came into her head, right? Well, I went back to chapter 1 and she talks about the nightmare even then, before she, or maybe she's telling the story in reverse and she's like farther along and then telling what happened, but
I
she
think
calls him the
so.
nightmare. Okay, even from the beginning. So maybe I'm
Right.
just confused. But we are introduced to the members of her family right off the bat, and it's a classic fantasy family roll call. We have the well-loved, strong, and powerful father, Eric Spendle, the head of the proud Spindle family, and he was the captain of the Destriers. And then we have her dead mother, Iris, the evil stepmother, Miriam, and then the two mean twin half-sisters, Dimia and Naya, which are 7 years younger than her, and then her really cool cousin, Ione, and her powerful uncle and aunt, Sir Hawthorne and Aunt Opal. And Aunt Opal is a favorite standout. So is her cousin Ione.
Yeah, impression I got of the twins is that they're not I didn't really see them so much as mean as kind of like dumb and frivolous and just like two kind of like twittering like little birds in a way.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
that's true.
Before we get too far, I also love that the city or the town is called Blunder.
Yeah.
Like literally a mistake, right?
Right. Yeah. And just like blundering around in the mist. I love that.
Yeah.
The vibe of the book is so warm and classic. It's perfect dark fairy tale. For me, it was like the perfect amount of gothic. in the book. I felt like in the way that Cruel Prince was sort of romantic, this one took a dark turn.
Definitely.
So it's Elspeth's name day, and they've decided to go to the city to visit her father because she lives with her aunt and uncle. When he arrives, he carries a bundle of yarrow, and it's a complicated family dynamic again because her mother had passed away, and you can tell her dad still has a lot of affection for that time with her mother, and I think his new wife can tell as well. Chapter 2 opens up with another sonnet. It says, magic is hate, but also is love. Nothing is free. Nothing is safe. It comes at a cost. You're found and you're lost. Magic is love, but it's also hate. The book is filled with these little rhyming sonnets that don't have a lot of context, but are repeated over and over again throughout the book. We learn more about how Elspeth grew up. Like I said, she was watched by her aunt and uncle.
I think that those sonnets, they're from the old Book of Alders, right?
Yeah.
So it's all of these childhood nursery rhymes and that keep coming up again and again.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, it's really cool. I love the way that it's kind of like doled out to you. One thing that's interesting about Elspeth's infection is that the animals are able to sense her infection, and so she's always stayed away from animals. One evening, she watches her uncle, and somehow they were able to swipe a Providence card, and they leave it out on the table, and Elspeth gets a hold of it. Across the top, it says a nightmare, and it grants the user the ability to speak thoughts into anyone's mind. But if it's used for too long, then it will reveal the user's darkest fears. Elspeth is drawn to the monster on the card. It's a vicious, dark, black and gray thing, neither man nor beast, with jagged teeth, yellow cat eyes. She rubs her finger across the velvet of the card, and that's the last that we see in that moment. She wakes up on the library floor and hears claws tapping, jumps up, searching for an intruder, but the library is empty, and she realizes the noise is coming from within her mind, that the monster is in her head, and it's a distinctly male voice, but it only says hello.
So creepy.
I love this idea of having a monster in your head that you hide from everyone. It's just love that idea. It's such a good premise for a book. The monster, the nightmare, helped her the day that the physicians came, and he can see Providence cards. So she can too. She can ask him for help, and he does, but if he does help her, it takes a toll on her, and she can feel him changing within her mind. She's never told anyone about the nightmare in her head, and he's been there for 11 years. At some point in the next scene, a highwayman attacks her. These highwaymen are like a huge nuisance. I had never really heard the term highwayman before, and they're right from the beginning of the book. They're like obviously a huge nuisance and a big part of the book.
Right, but it's actually two highwaymen that attack her.
Yeah, that's right. Yes. Yeah, there's two of them this time. While she's being attacked, she asks the nightmare for help, and she becomes super strong and fast, digging her nails into their skin and tossing them about. She is left with a dark, hot vein of black ink down her arm that fades after she uses the nightmare strength, but I don't think it ever goes away entirely. And it was like that ever since the day she was infected.
Yeah, that I'm not sure. I'm so confused about that as well. If it is like the black veins come when they're using their magic, or if it's all the time. Because if it's all the time, and also like what about the veins in your neck, in your face? Like I understand that you could like cover your arms, but
yeah,
I wonder. So
if
I guess sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. No, just based on what we were talking about before we started recording, and it's so popular right now. I wonder if it's going to take like a K-pop Demon Hunters kind of like it gets a little bit more up your neck and things like that. You know,
I like that as the
become more
degeneration
infected.
happens. Yeah. Anyway.
Okay, so now we're in chapter 3. It talks about the power and loss of the 12 blessings, 12 curses, and 12 providence cards. Her family is invited to Stone, which is the capital, or where the king lives in Blunder, for the king's equinox. Her aunt is concerned about their finances and how bad the harvest was. That's a big part of the equinox. Her uncle says he's bringing the nightmare card as he plops it down in front of everyone. Everyone's surprised, but Elspeth, who is starting to wonder who her uncle really is. We get some of the old book lore, which is the Book of Alders, and we learn that the Providence cards cannot be destroyed. They're woven by old magic, the Shepherd King's magic that was gifted to him by the spirit of the wood, and the Providence cards were formed from that. But her uncle thinks he was infected, like the Shepherd King was infected, and it wasn't a gift from the spirit of the wood, that the spirit infected him. The nightmare doesn't seem to like the Shepherd King, or maybe he doesn't like being called an infection. I wrote that in my notes because I wasn't sure at that point, chapter 3, what was going on. She has a memory of her aunt holding the old Book of Alders, where the spirit of the wood granted the Shepherd King a rare type of magic for his reverence. He created the Providence cards from it, but people stopped going to the woods to venerate the spirit, and so the spirit of the woods created the mist to lure them back. It separated the kingdoms and towns, and children who lingered in the mist for too long became sick with an unruly type of magic, and they went mad as they aged. So the Shepherd King wrote the book to help protect the people from the mist. There's a way to lift the mist if all of the Providence cards are united and there's salt and I think blood of an infected. But the spirit tricked the Shepherd King into giving up his Twin Alders card. So the deck can never be united. That's the legend. Elspeth has her first dream in 11 years that night. She's covered in vines in a room with a king seated on a stone in armor old and weathered, but he transforms into the nightmare. It's like she's walked in on the nightmare in her head. He seems angry that she's come there unannounced. He tells a story about a king and a girl and the monster they became when they were together.
Yeah, I loved that scene where he's like, "What are you doing? You're here on my time," and she's like, "You're literally in my head."
In my head.
Like,
I do not want to
I'm
be here.
dreaming. Right.
Chapter 4 opens up and the card says magic smells of salt. That's a huge part of the book. Whenever magic is being used or you're getting close to something magical, there's always a pungent smell of salt. We learn that there are 78 Providence cards and that the nightmare is one of 2 nightmare cards. There's 12 black horses, 11 golden eggs, 10 prophets, 9 white eagles, 8 maidens, 7 chalices, 6 wells, 5 iron gates, 4 sights, 3 mirrors, and 2 nightmares, and 1 Twin Alders card. Elspeth suspects her uncle will trade the nightmare card for Ione's hand in marriage, or to be introduced to Prince Hoth, who just sounds awful at this point. The word Hoth is just awful. Ione and Elspeth fight because Ione says Prince Hoth will be different from his predecessors, and Elspeth disagrees strongly. And we also learn that 2 cards are all the king needs to unite the deck, and he's very desperate to get them. So he's been working on that, the king has. They are at the equinox in the city of stone, and Elspeth is seated next to the king's nephew, Emery Yu, and the chapter ends. The next chapter opens up, and Elspeth is feeling sick from all the wine and all the cards that are surrounding her, because remember, she can see the cards all the time and it's very overwhelming for her. So she leaves the great hall.
She like registers them like these bright lights that kind of, the closer she gets to them, the brighter it is. So, you know, having all of these different cards in the room, it can be like super distracting, I'm sure.
Yeah. And so like the scythe card is red and it's like very bright. She can see like the chalice card is blue. And so it's all these like shining, almost like psychedelic lights all over the place. And so she decides to leave the great hall, and Emery Yu follows her. He's been trying to talk to her, and he's follows her up the staircase. He's pushing himself onto her. The great room is below her. I was getting very anxious during this part. I didn't know what was going to happen. She's scared that Emery might push her, and he's kind of like unhinged. Emery is. He's acting very strange, and this is the first time we've ever met him. So he says he's leaning in on her, and he says there's something odd about her. I see you, Elspeth Spendle. I see a pretty maiden with black hair and charcoal eyes. I see yellow eyes darkened by hate. He says that he sees her long, pale fingers covered in blood, and she slaps him across the face, and he doesn't let go. She hears steps, and someone grabs Emery and pulls him down the stairs, and in these what she calls slow, even tones calms him. And that's curious because I think that's the first time we see the scythe card.
This scene was so chaotic. When I was reading it, I was like, this is like so just out of the blue. What is happening here?
Right. We're so early on and she's already being like assaulted. And so the man comes up behind, and his name is Raven Yu, and it's her father's successor, the captain of the Destriers. And he has controlled his brother and he sends him away. He walks her to her room and she immediately falls asleep. The next day, the chapter opens and it's talking about the maiden card. It talks about, be wary the maiden, she will eat her own heart. Be wary the pink. And the pink is the color that the card gives off. Elspeth wakes at noon and her whole family is in her bed because they saw her leave with Emery Yu the night before. And her stepmother says that Emery's bad news, even for Elspeth, is what she says.
Thanks.
Yeah. They discuss Emery and how he was sent to live with the king so that his cousin could control him using the scythe card. And we learn that the scythe card can control anyone they want when used. She looks for Ione, sorry for the fight that they had earlier, thinking that if there was ever a possibility for a world in the future where people accepted the infected, Ione would be the leader of that kind of a world. She would be someone that would make that kind of a world. And so Elspeth is feeling sorry and wants to talk to Ione.
Yeah. And this whole dynamic, it's really sad and sweet, and this sort of loss of friendships. Like when you've had like a really, like, I don't have siblings, but like when you've had like a really close girlfriend and then they're dating someone that you really dislike, it can be so hard and so straining. And even though they're not dating yet, just the thought of her being introduced to him or presented to him is really distressful for Elspeth. And also, I just really quickly also wanted to point out that Hoth is the crown prince, so he's next in line to the throne. So Ione would potentially have a seat of...
Right, very much. She asked her aunt a question. If her aunt thinks that anyone else has survived the fever and didn't get caught, her aunt says that she doubts it, that everyone that gets caught goes to the dungeon and, quote, they know what happens in the dungeon, but we don't know what happens. She turns around and bright pink light is pouring from Ione. Elspeth is in shock, searching Ione's face to see if Ione has used the maiden card. She hasn't, but Elspeth presses her, and Ione can't understand how Elspeth knows that she has the card and why she is so angry with Hoth Rowan. Elspeth begs her not to marry Hoth Rowan if he asks. She says that the maiden will steal Ione's features, the wrinkles next to her eyes, her too loud voice, and things like that, the things that Elspeth has loved. And so Ione says to Elspeth, do you love me? Elspeth says yes, and Ione says, then let me make my own choices, and she leaves. Elspeth is heartbroken. The nightmare says that the maiden is a deeply misunderstood card, which I thought was interesting. Chapter 6 opens up with the highwayman meets the hanged man. It's Raven Yu. She's talking to Raven Yu and she looks at his belt. It's the same dagger that he attacked her with 2 weeks ago. And she realizes that Raven is one of the highwaymen that she came upon a couple weeks before. And he knows that it was her there too.
Yeah, and Raven is the current head of the Destriers. So the Destriers are pretty much the king's personal royal guard, and he is fulfilling the position that Elspeth's father once had.
Yeah. So she runs away from him. She's getting away, but then there's salt. And she can hear Raven's voice in her head, another nightmare card. He finds her and pushes her down and tells her to be quiet, that the king is coming and that Raven won't hurt her, that he won't hurt her. She kicks him in the nose. He's bleeding. He tells her to stay down and one more noise or they're both dead. And the nightmare says to Elspeth in her head, the king is not a friend. Her sleeve is ripped during this tussle and her wrist is showing, and he sees her veins dark and twisted and then repeats after he sees them, I'm not going to hurt you. King Rowan stokes the kingdom's fear of the infection. Elspeth's suspicious that Raven saw the nightmare or heard him when he was in her mind, but he hasn't. Raven's taking her somewhere, but not to the dungeon. He says that he wants to understand her. She tells him that she has no magic, but he smiles at that. So chapter 7, the tarot for this chapter is about making a charm. And so if an animal dies and then you take a little piece of that animal, it will protect you from the mist. And so everybody who is not infected carries charms with them. So they are in the king's castle in a dark hallway. Raven has taken Elspeth there and she doesn't know why. They approach a door with a stag on it. He unlocks it. She steps inside and the dogs are all around snapping and barking at her. Again, animals don't like Elspeth. Raven says, I don't know what's gotten into them. He leaves her and locks her in. When he returns, he brings 2 people, Jesper Yu, the only female destrier, and an older man. He brought a physician. Elspeth is freaking out. The physician's name is Philip Willow. and he says that he won't report her and that he has to obey the captain. They ask her what her magic is. She lies and tells them that she can see Providence cards. They want to know if she can see through the mist. She says yes, and Jesper is elated. They say she is perfect. More people arrive. Prince Renelm Rowan shows up. She says that they are classic princes, gorgeous, well-loved, but in the nightmare version of the story, they are the villains. The berry of Rowans is always red, the nightmare repeats. No peace will be known until the final Rowan is dead. The Rowans use the Book of Alders to spread...
He's such a drama queen.
Oh,
Sorry.
he so is. I love that he rhymes everything. He's just like mumbling off in the corner. Rhyming is my favorite. The Rowans use the Book of Alders to spread fear, and that's why the nightmare hates them. They altered the text to control and reject the infected. And Elspeth explains that with 3 taps of the scythe, they can make her do anything, not because the card moves her legs, but because she would want to do them. She would want to do whatever is asked of her. She introduces herself as Elspeth Spindle, and Raven says to her, "Oh, not Jane Yarrow," which is the name she gave on the highway when she saw the destroyers moonlighting as highwaymen.
This motley crew leave Elspeth for a moment, and then Raven comes back in with a pocket full of Providence cards because they're going to have a little test. It wasn't good enough that she saw the scythe card in Elm's pocket because many people know that Elm carries one, so that could have just been a really lucky guess. The thing about the Rowans is, so there's only the 4 scythe cards, and only the Rowans have those cards. So essentially they're the most powerful in the deck, and nothing else can really, compete with that. So they've got all the power. Raven asks if Elspeth can see the colors with her eyes closed, and when she responds yes, he asks to blindfold her. So things are heating up, my friends. His lips keep arching up in the side in a subtle smile, and at one point his gaze drops to her lips. And I think that we've found our love interest. During this test, we learn more about the Providence card. Each one grants power, but at an equal cost. Our girl is passing this test with flying colors, pun intended, when Raven pulls out the Twin Alders card, and she can't see the colors. Turns out that one is a fake. Elspeth passes the test, but is still unsure of Raven's motivations, because as captain of the Destriers, it's his job to hunt down infected children and eliminate their families. So she decides to make him an offer. She's certain that the king doesn't know that the captain of his own guard and the prince, because Renelm, I feel like we just need to kind of quickly break down this little family structure. So we have the king. He has 2 sons. He's got the Crown Prince Hothrowan, who is a destrier and a real piece of crap. And we have Renelm, who is kind of like this, he's described as this foxy, cunning, sly sort of guy, but he is actually loyal to the Yews. So then we have Raven and Jesper. Raven, his sister Jesper, their parents, and then the physician that all work together.
Yeah,
so,
and they call Renelm just Elm from that point on, and I think I missed that.
Yeah, yeah. And it's also
they're the same person.
Yeah, yeah, one and the same. But all of the families they all have names based on trees, which I found to be really cute. So we've got the Hawthorns, the Rowans, and the Yews.
And the Spindles and the Willows.
And the Spindles, exactly, yeah. So Elspeth is certain that the king doesn't know that the captain of his guard and one of his sons, Prince Elm, are looking for the Providence guards behind his back. So she tells them that she'll help them find the cards in exchange for keeping her secret, and she wants her family to be left alone despite the fact that they hid her fever. And after being goaded by the nightmare, she tells him that he may never use the nightmare card on her again. Chapter 9 starts out with an epigraph outlining how to use the cards. Essentially, you have to tap a card 3 times to use its power and 3 more times to stop it, but the card has no loyalty of its own, and if one's stolen from you, the magic can be used by the thief. So it's the night of the equinox, and Raven has just left Elspeth at the stairs to talk to the others, but he lets her know he'll see her at dinner. Elspeth and Nightmare are pretty certain that Raven doesn't trust her because obviously she's trying to hide something from him. She obviously doesn't want him to know about the creature that lives in her head.
The man, the 500-year-old man that lives in her head.
Yeah, rent-free.
Yeah, rent-free.
The castle/corridor is really busy and full of people bustling around for this big party that's happening, and Elsbeth really would rather just be home, which is so relatable.
Right. They're both like very relatable the entire time.
Just so curmudgeon-y, all of these characters.
Yeah, they take turns being grumpy and it's pretty funny.
Yeah. Elspeth makes it back to her family's room and is almost immediately interrogated by her twin sisters, Dimia and Naya, about where she was this whole time and why she has dirt on her dress and brambles in her hair. Which, like, oops.
Yeah.
Elspeth changes the subject by asking if they knew that Ione, their cousin, has a maiden card. The two of them are tittering around her, helping her wash up and change, when one of them mentions that they didn't know their uncle was that wealthy, and that he could buy Elspeth a new dress, even if the color is totally wrong for the occasion. And they're also surprised that he has Providence cards. So, rewinding a little bit, we find out that there's this guy, Alex, who one equinox years and years ago, Elspeth might have maybe hooked up with. It turns out that he's at this party as well, and he's been asking about her because, of course, he has. Yeah. And with a stern warning from her stepmother, Miriam, not to embarrass them, they head to dinner. They have to be kind of like announced into the room, like the court by family. And so the procession that we get of this family is Elspeth's dad and her stepmother, arm in arm, followed by the two twin sisters. And then it's just Elspeth. And they're taken up and presented to Prince Elm. So Elspeth's father says that she hasn't been to Equinox in years, and Elm asks if he can escort her to dinner. Nightmare isn't keen on this idea, though, because he believes the Rowans aren't to be trusted as they hold on to power too tightly. But Elspeth takes his arm, and she notes his appearance. He's described as undeniably handsome, with striking green eyes, a freckled nose, and autumn-colored hair. So I'm getting Lucian.
Yeah, I was just picturing that as well.
Right?
Yeah, I didn't the first time, but as you were describing it.
But the red light from his scythe card casts weird shadow on his face, which Elspeth finds really unnerving. Will makes a snide remark about how Raven doesn't let people into his confidences often, and now somehow Raven thinks that Elspeth is valuable. And then Hoth, Elm's brother, walks up and introduces himself to Elspeth by kissing Elspeth on the hand, which makes Elm gag, and he's like, that's enough of that, and shuffles Elspeth off away from him, which is a good thing because Prince Hoth is really bad news, and he is brutal and deadly where Elm is sly and cunning. I love the comedic relief in this, just like these like little scenes.
Elm is one of my favorite characters. You can tell he's just got little brother vibes, you know?
Yeah.
And he's like on nobody's side and just like keeping everybody in line, and I enjoy the character. I think he's a lot of comedic relief too, and he says what everybody's thinking.
Right. So Elspeth has been looking for her cousin Ione, but she can't find her. However, she runs into her aunt, who looks like she's been crying, and tells her that Ione is off somewhere with the king and her uncle, and that her uncle and the king made a deal without her aunt's input. But before she can tell her anymore, her aunt has to go wrangle her two small boys that are just running around this party like animals. So there's kind of this chaos and confusion, but something is definitely up with Ione, Hoth, the king, and her uncle. Then Alex comes over and he tells Elspeth, he's like, hey, guess what? I got your father's permission for you to sit with my family. Won't that be fun?
Just like you asked. Yeah, just like you wanted.
And he's like going on and on about how his mom is so excited to meet her. And this is when Raven and Elspeth lock eyes from across the room. The tension, it's building. Raven comes over and Elspeth tells Alex that she's already told Raven that she would sit with the U's. Raven and Elspeth have a little moment where she tells him that Alex is too nice for his own good. And Raven says it's the nice ones you have to look out for. Elspeth asks if Raven is nice, and he tells her, no, he's not nice at all. A little cringe.
Love it. I just love how often his lip is curling. Like at least every chapters his lip is curling, and I'm always like trying to.
His gaze is dropping to her mouth.
Yeah.
It's smoldering.
Yes, it is. The smolder.
They move to their table, and everyone is standing, waiting for the king to arrive. The king is announced, followed by High Prince Hoth, and Hoth has an announcement for the crowd. It turns out that Elspeth's uncle has been knighted because he gave them the elusive nightmare card, and also Ione Hawthorne is going to be Hoth's wife. The crowd goes wild. Elm, Rowan, Jesper Yu, Raven, and Elspeth, however, are not pleased. Chapter 10 starts with an epigraph stating that in exchange for the nightmare card, the author bartered their soul. Ominous. Ione has definitely used the maiden card and is now shockingly beautiful. She, quote, is Ione and also not. And to be honest, it feels like a really great commentary on plastic surgery.
Ooh, yeah. I think the maiden card being misunderstood, I thought was a really interesting little tidbit, and I can't wait to learn more about it.
Right. But all of this hubbub has brought something to Elsbeth's attention. Why would the king want her uncle's nightmare card if his own captain of the guard already has one? Meaning, the king probably doesn't know about Raven's card. Elsbeth wonders if Elm is in on this little secret as well, and demands an explanation. Raven takes Elspeth to his rooms in stone, which are both barren and littered with books and piles of clothing, and in the back of his wardrobe, he takes out the nightmare card so he can call his council and get some guidance about what to do from here.
I don't know. I don't really buy this like messy room for Raven U.
Really?
I don't know. Do we see him having a messy room? I don't know.
I don't know either. I feel like things
The
would be,
captain
he
of the
seems like a
destriers?
he seems like a very kind of like organized, put together sort of a dude,
Buttoned
buttoned
up.
up. Yeah, yeah. I don't know.
Maybe. I don't know. I thought that
Yeah.
was an interesting little piece to put in there. I wonder what that was about.
Right. Okay. Elsbeth is panicking that he might discover the creature in her head, but Nightmare says that Raven won't hear her thoughts unless he focuses on her, and he says he knows a thing or two about the Providence cards. And I think at here I was like, I know who he is. I know it.
Right. Yeah. I think when we first got that like little image on the
Of the night.
stone. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because, yeah, just the way that
Yeah.
it was described and everything.
Raven lets Elsbeth know he's contacted his family and they're to meet them in the cellar, but before they leave the room, they hear physicians talking in the hallway. The physicians are talking about Emery. So remember that drunken creep who cornered Elsbeth earlier? They're essentially saying that he's getting worse, and they're deciding to up his sedatives and not mention anything to the captain, aka Raven, aka Emery's brother. And I might have thrown of glass PTSD, but I'm reminded of the assassins talking outside of Selena's door in the end of Assassin's Blade. If you know, you know.
Oh, yeah. Oh, interesting. Yeah. If you know, you know, then yeah.
One of the physicians' name is Orith Willow, and it turns out that he actually came to Elsbeth's father's house once looking for infection, but her aunt had hidden her away.
I wonder if those two are related, Philic and Orith. Willows,
Yeah,
they're both
so
willows. Yeah.
right, and that's what I was wondering too, if like all willows are physicians or if they
That'd
just
make
both
it easy.
happen to be right. Like,
Yeah.
do you
And
change your
all
name when you
and
become
all
a
Rowans
physician?
are kings and all U's are destriers, you know, maybe
Right.
those are words. Yeah.
Hi. So Raven and Elspeth share another steamy moment with Elspeth's hand on top of hers so she can't open the door, and his finger pressed to her mouth to urge her to stay quiet. Sparks are certainly flying, and I'm living for it.
Mm-hmm.
It turns out that Raven has another Providence card hidden away in his wardrobe, the Mirror, which grants the ability to turn its user invisible. And he offers it to Elsbeth, but she insists that she cannot use it because she's low-key kind of worried that if she touches it, she'll absorb it into her in some way, the same way that she did with the Nightmare card all those years ago. Raven doesn't force her hand, but he does use the card himself, and so he's completely invisible, but Elspeth can see the color of the card he's using, so she uses that to follow him back out into the rest of the castle. On the way to the cellars, they run into Miriam, who lets Elspeth know that she saw her running off with Raven and tells her pretty much that she's an idiot and that she's weird and infected, and that her father sent her off because she doesn't care about her. To which Elsbeth responds, he still loves her mother, even years after her death, and that's why he won't let Miriam redecorate, and why he orders irises for the parlor, which clearly Miriam wouldn't do. And Miriam just kind of goes and returns to the party with her tail between her legs.
Where it belongs.
Right. And Invisible Raven wipes a tear from Elsbeth's cheek, and they continue on.
Sweet.
He warns her that things won't be easy in the cellar either, and that her wanting to know everything is a double-edged sword. They enter the room where they've been earlier, the one with the hounds, and Jesper, Elm, Philic, and Raven's parents are all there waiting.
Panic.
My notes say, Chapter 11, it's interrogation time, baby!
She's like, you said none of this. It's fascinating. The whole book is a really interesting conversation on consent, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, there's a lot of relationships that are desperately depending on consent and understanding and secrets. And I love building a house of cards like that. A house
Okay.
of cards like that. Sorry, I didn't even realize until I said.
So, the council has decided to give Elspeth a choice of what card they'll use on her because they're going to make totally certain that she's telling the truth. She picks the scythe at the nightmare suggestion, which means we'll be dealing with Elm's magic. Elm has her slap herself in the face, hard, to make sure that she's under his control. And when he makes her do it a third time, Raven pushes off the wall and snarls, "Enough!" which has slightly the same energy of a "who did this to you" moment.
Right. Yeah. But you can see a little bit of the Rowan, darkness coming in.
Yes. He reminds me of Loki.
Yeah.
Elm asks her some BS questions like, does she think that Raven's attractive? And then they get down to business. She lets them know that her uncle has been hiding the nightmare card for the last 11 years, and she doesn't know how he got it, only that the night he came home with it, his sword was bloody. They press to ask her if she has any other magic than being able to see the cards, because it's highly unlikely that she would have been able to overpower Elm and Raven that night on the forest road. Which is when Nightmare chimes up and says that the scythe has no sway on him. So he uses his magic to loosen the scythe's hold on her so she can lie to them about her not-so-imaginary friend.
Right. Her very, imaginary to everyone else.
She's passed their little test, and Elspeth asks them why they aren't working with the crown to unite the deck to free Blunder from the mists. And they explain that in order to bind the cards, the king needs infected blood, and he's planning on sacrificing Emery Yu. So, the weirdo who accosted her in the stairs earlier, he's infected with magic, which explains his odd behavior, and the king has plans for him. Obviously, the Yu family isn't very keen on this idea. Elspeth asks who they plan to sacrifice in Emery's stead, and they tell her that it will be someone close to the king who has committed many atrocities, and they let her know that they will tell her more at Castle U if she decides to help them. Elspeth asks Nightmare if she really will be cured if the deck is united, and he asks her who said she needed a cure, but he won't really give her a straight answer. Elspeth decides to help them. Chapter 12. Elspeth is waiting outside of the cellar door while the council talks about what to do next. They want Elspeth to return with them to Castle U, but they need a viable reason why she would be staying with them. Elspeth wishes she could hear what they were talking about when Nightmare tells her to figure it out the old-fashioned way, aka eavesdropping, girl. Jesper comes up with the idea to tell the court and Elspeth's family that Raven wants to court her, and they will be supervised by his mother for an extended stay together. Everyone loves this idea, except for Raven, which Elspeth takes offense to. But the fake dating trope has officially entered the chat.
I like this one. I was going to ask you, is it fake dating? Is it forced proximity? I was wondering what the trope was, but I like that one.
I would say fake dating, yeah.
Fake dating. I like it.
When Raven comes out to tell her the plan, she's startled and she falls back from the door that she's had her ear pressed up against. So he's able to clock right away that she's been listening. Elspeth is definitely not very smooth. She agrees to the fake dating plan, and Raven tells her they'll spend an hour more at the Equinox party just so that they can be seen together before they leave for his place. But first, Raven wants to take Elspeth to visit Emery. He explains to her that they need to find the deck quickly before the winter solstice because Emery's magic flares then, and the Book of Alders states that the cards should be joined on the darkest day of the year. He also explains that his uncle, the king, views killing Emery as a mercy killing instead of slowly letting him waste away to degeneration.
And this is a justification that's often used to justify things that are very controversial and wrong, just outright wrong, is to say that it's, mercy or somehow doing something for the better of the group.
However, when they get to Emery's chamber, he's gone. Chapter 13 starts with an epigraph about degeneration, stating that it is the cost of magic and that it can come quickly or slowly, but the person experiencing it typically loses their sanity or their life. Okay, so yikes, it's time to find Emery. Raven's parents and sisters are looking in the castle, and Elspeth and Raven are looking outside in the gardens, where the party has moved for drinking and dancing. It turns out that when Emery can get away from the guards, he likes to wander, so this isn't really like a new occurrence. Before they can look for him, though, they run into the king, who is basically like, "Oh yeah, I know who you are. You're Eric's daughter. Haven't seen you at court before, but I'm looking forward to seeing more of you. It turns out you've made quite an impression on my nephew." Awkward, but okay.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Okay.
Elspeth spots Emery getting into an argument with two men with white eagle cards, the card of courage. It turns out that Emery picked one of their pockets and they aren't happy about it. Meanwhile, Emery is all giggles, even with a bloody nose and the promise of more violence to come. He's drunk on the fairy wine.
I was gonna say, everybody's pretty drunk. It's a pretty drunk book.
Elspeth points him out to Raven, but before she can get to him, she's knocked down by some rowdy partygoers, only to be held back up by Elm, who she's still not happy with over the whole slapping herself debacle. She's still trying to get to Emery, while Elm is chatting with her and telling her it's been a long night, and they should just let Raven blow off some steam. Meanwhile, Raven is having a blast beating up these two dudes. Elm tells Elspeth that Emery's power is being able to see someone's deepest, darkest secrets and everything about them if he just touches them once, which is creepy, giving him mentioning seeing yellow eyes the first time that they met.
Right.
And then Elm lets it slip that Raven is also infected. And Elspeth is reeling as she watches Raven say something to the men that she can't hear before they promptly offer up their cards. When he touches the cards, he absorbs the color into them. Dun dun dun!
I think it's so cool that she got to see his magic before he knew anything about hers, because it's such a relief to the reader and to her that not only does he have magic, but he has a magic that's like similar to hers that has something to do with touching the cards.
Yeah.
And so that's cool.
I was like, whoa, twin flames. Twin
I know. Yeah, it was definitely yin yang for me.
Okay, chapter 14. Elspeth is pissed and wants Raven to explain things now. Emery's being a handful. He's spinning twigs in his fingers and like poking himself in the eye. He's climbing a tree and falling out of it. It's just shenanigans. Elm tells Elspeth and Raven that he will watch Emery so that they can chat. Raven explains that yes, he's infected. Most of the Providence cards don't actually work on him, but before he can tell her more, they're interrupted by more partygoers, and he reminds Elspeth that this really isn't the time or place to talk about this. Elspeth, however, wants to argue more, going so far as to yank on Raven's tunic as he's walking away, and he wheels on her, quote unquote, like a bird of prey. But before he can get a word in, her twin sisters are there, mouth agape, when they spot Elspeth with the captain of the Destriers.
Because now she's been caught with the son of the king, the captain of the Destriers. She has Alex somewhere in there. She's been busy today.
Raven discreetly reminds her that they're supposed to be courting before taking her hand and then excusing themselves to go dance. They dance together, causing quite the spectacle, but Elspeth is still upset that he's been omitting things, which seems hypocritical considering the monster in her head, but I digress. Raven tells her admitting to treason on night 1 has to count for something, and then Elspeth spots Elm and Emery near the castle. Emery's eyes go wide when he sees her and starts rattling off quotes from the old Book of Elders about the nightmare card before he begins to cough up blood. To this, the nightmare responds, "Shame, I was just beginning to like him."
The nightmare is awful.
He gets pretty funny later.
He does. I guess if you have 500 years of just hanging around, or, in an 11-year-old's head. Hi, welcome back. We're recording on a new day, and I'm a little sick today, so please excuse my scratchy voice, but we're going to jump right into chapter 15 of One Dark Window. And the chapter opens up with, again, a tarot card, and on there, it's talking about how the ties of Blunder are strong, and it refers to something called Cecil ropes, which I had to look up, and they're just like ropes made of local fibers that are braided together, and they tie things together. They're usually pretty strong but very thin, and so I didn't know if there was anything there. I just wanted to read about it. Elspeth is packing to leave to go and move in with the Hughes for a little while, and her uncle is surprised that the Hughes have even taken notice of her, and he honestly seems relieved that they are taking her in general.
Great, thanks.
Yeah.
It's like such a vote of confidence always from her family.
Yeah, she's just like packing her bag and she's like, she can just like feel all these emotions. But while she's packing her bag, she is spending a lot of time remembering how Raven's hand lingered on hers in the last chapter. And at the end of the chapter, Raven asks her, "What are we, Miss Spindle?" during a little heated exchange between the two of them. And they don't really get too far with that, but she's on her way to the Yu's house, or the Yu castle. The chapter 16, it opens up with a letter from Aunt Opal to Elspeth, which I think she wrote 1 hour after Elspeth left the house. And I was kind of laughing because it's the ramblings of an old woman. It's just kind of like little bits and pieces here where she doesn't really say anything, but you can tell she's trying to give some advice. She says, "Be wary, be clever, be good, be careful at Castle Yu. There's old magic there." And I just think it's hilarious that she wrote her a letter 1 hour after she left. "Hi, Opal is me. She is me and I am her."
Same. I love how we get all these little breadcrumbs about like how creepy and ancient Castle U is as well.
Right. You can get the feeling from like multiple different characters that there's just like something going on with that castle and that the family Yu in general has something in their past. So they are on their way to steal a gate card from the father of some local girls. The girl's name is Sylvia Pine. And so again, another tree name. And Jasper is sort of drunk. Is Jasper sort of a drunk? Or is that just Jasper on this day? Because I'm starting to pick up that she drinks a lot.
I don't know. Maybe it might just be the culture, but I feel like Elm is also
Yeah.
pretty consistently drunk
Yeah, I was
or
gonna say I write
drinking.
it. Yeah, I write it later on in my notes, but like it's just like everybody's drunk, like all the time.
Right?
They're just like
Yeah.
drinking all the time. Like, are you
I think
drinking? Let's get to
it's just
drinking.
that like that medieval era of
Yeah.
like, well, the water's poisonous, so
Yeah.
we're always drinking mead.
So they immediately bring up the scandal of Ione's engagement and the maiden card to distract the girls once they get to them into feeling comfortable enough to tell them where their father keeps the card. And Elspeth is feeling used in this moment, but it is the talk of the town. And they're using it to sort of show them that they're willing to give salacious details in exchange for any details that they might have.
Right. I love this. It's kind of like the female version of like an action movie where it's like we're gossiping to get information and I don't know.
Yeah, I kind of actually felt in this moment because they're starting to riff off of each other's personal lives. And I feel like it reminded me of Ocean's 11 or all of those movies where they come
Right.
and they bring together these like specialists in all these different categories and they don't know much about each other, but when they're live in the moment, they sort of have to riff on these little things that they know. And they're constantly having to like elbow each other in the ribs to like, don't say that, stamping on each other's feet to move things along.
Yeah, it was a really fun scene.
Yeah. Eventually, when the deck is united, they will need to spill the blood of an infected one. So the U team has decided to spill the blood of the leader of the physicians. That's when Elspeth learns that the leader of the physicians is infected, and his gift is that he can see the infection in others. So Elspeth agrees with this particular premeditated murder.
It's so crazy how we slowly start to see that the king kind of picks and chooses who is allowed to be infected and who's not because he kind of tests them to see if their magic can be useful to him in some way and
Right.
probably also not overpower him as well.
Right. And so it's not explicitly said at this point, but you're starting to realize all these different handpicked people that are infected.
Right.
Elspeth tells the group that she knows someone who has a well card and that he lives just down the street. And so chapter 17 opens up with the mirror card. On the tarot card, it says, "Be wary the violet, be wary the dread, be wary the glass in the world of the dead." And we know that the mirror card allows you to see the dead. Is that right?
Yeah, so the mirror, I believe, makes you invisible, right? And
Right.
the other side of that is that you can see the dead.
That's right. Yeah, is that you will be forced to see the dead. So the author finally says that Elspeth is exploring the area behind Yew Castle. The nightmare wants her to go into this building that's there. It has no doors, just a window. The sentence ends with the author saying, "One dark window." Yay. I was like,
That's the name of the book.
A little war wages within Elspeth as the nightmare compels her to show him that place with the window. Meanwhile, Raven is trying to explain the ill effects from using the nightmare card too much. He says that when he uses it too much, he hears a voice, but he doesn't see anything like Elspeth does. That nightmare and her nightmare don't seem to be the same in my mind, but I'm not sure. When she asks him what the voice sounds like, he says that it sounds like his voice, like Raven's voice, and that gives me the creeps.
I wonder if this is like actually like a different entity that lives within him, or if it's in just his dark and negative inner monologue that he's hearing.
Right. Yeah, very interesting. I do have a theory on this. We will get to
Wait,
it
what's
another
your
time.
theory?
Oh, so and I think I have some quotes that can back this up, but I think that there's something very suspicious about the timeline when the nightmare appears and when Elspeth is first infected. Because later on, and we'll get to it, it's unclear which one of those things happens first. If there's someone living in her head and then Elspeth is infected and then she starts to call him the nightmare, or if that happens in another order of events. I think possibly that Elspeth was infected. And then the day that the physicians came, when she wandered into the woods, I think that that mist, when it went into her body, I think it was what she calls the nightmare, which is actually what we come to find out, the Shepherd King. And when she touches the nightmare card, it changes the voice in her head into the nightmare. Like, I think the Shepherd King is a separate entity in her head. And if she had touched the maiden card, it would have turned him into a woman.
Okay.
That's my theory, but I'm not
Okay.
sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
We'll see how it goes. And I'll show you some of the chapters later. So when she comes out of the woods, she says that she seems to be relatively unharmed by magic. So I think at that point, she doesn't know that there's the nightmare in her head. But he says later in the book that he pulled her into the woods. He helped her that day when the physicians came. And she talks about the nightmare in her head about a chapter and a half before she touches the card in the beginning of the book. And it could be, like we've discussed, that she's just talking about it out of order. But I do wonder what that the significance is of Raven also hearing a voice in his head, not seeing something, but it being his voice in his head and not someone else's voice. It wasn't a separate entity. He hears his voice in the nightmare.
Okay. I'm not sure. I think we'll have to keep reading, or maybe even do a reread. Yeah, maybe we'll get some more answers in the second book.
Yeah.
My understanding, again, is that she got infected with the sickness, and then she was sent to her aunt's house because she was infected, and her dad was the captain of the guard, so he worked really closely with the king, so he sent her away to hide her. And then when she touched the nightmare card, she absorbed the nightmare slash Shepherd King into her, and then he helped her when she called on him. He helped her escape the physicians. I also think that the Shepherd King and the nightmare are the same entity, but at different points in their timeline. Is my theory. So he started out as the Shepherd King. He's making all of these barters with the spirit of the woods, and the spirit of the woods is the one who controls the mist. And so as he's bartering away parts of himself, parts of his soul to create the deck, that's through time and magic. I think he turns into the nightmare, and he's no longer the king or the human that he was in his life. But yeah, we'll just have to find out, honestly. I think they're both really interesting theories.
Yeah, me too. It could be either way. I'm not really sure. And I could be reading into things that don't really mean anything.
Yeah, let us know what you think in the comments below if you've read this duology. What do you think the timeline of events are when the nightmare enters Elspeth?
Chapter 18 opens up. It's mostly talking about the mist in the beginning. Mind the mist, it does not lift. The spirit doth haunt, ever adrift. And I wanted to point out at this point, it's become very obvious to the reader that whenever we're reading something from the Book of Alders or we're listening to the nightmare speak, it's always in like a rhyming, childlike fairy tale verse. And so when you're reading, you can tell when it swaps between the Book of Alders, the nightmare, and Elspeth. So Elspeth gets dressed and she's overdressed, and Elm teases her for wearing a dress to go and rob people. She swaps it for a tunic and pants, and I feel like we're going through some real character development in this chapter. Whenever you swap out that skirt for pants, you know it's coming.
Thunder.
Yeah, exactly. Painting your eye. They are on their way to the Black Forest, and they're all assuring her that there will be no violence. but they're all very well prepared for no violence, strapping knives to themselves and other random leathers and things like that. They're getting very well prepared for just a good old walk in the woods. And they're dressed even more discreetly than she is, basically in all black. So they're definitely planning on sneaking up on people. Here we go. And yep, she gets on a horse for the first time in this scene. And I was right. We are definitely seeing some character development in this sequence because the horse bucks her off.
Because
Yeah.
remember, like, animals have this really big aversion to her because of the monster or the nightmare in her head.
Yeah, and she tries to tell Elm that, and he's like, everybody's like, just get on the horse. It's no big deal. And they're all very surprised when the horse bucks her to the ground. And there's sort of a discussion that happens in her head that possibly animals themselves are just scared of Elspeth and not the nightmare. The nightmare suggests that to her right as she's getting on the horse. And I think that's interesting that he's like, it's not me, it's you.
I
So in
guess
the
we'll
end,
never know.
yeah, I guess we'll never know. But I gotta tell you, there's some interesting things that are being raised about Elspeth from the nightmare's perspective. So in the end, she has to ride with Elm so he can keep the animals easy. With the scythe card, I'm wondering, or if he's just really good with animals. We learn that the spirit of the forest can take the form of animals, but that there's something always weird about that animal, like a deer with extra antlers. And I actually love this idea in fiction, and we see it pretty often. We were talking last week about K-pop demon hunters, and it reminds me of the often referenced three-eyed raven, which is across a lot of popular culture, and also the derpy tiger from K-pop demon hunter.
I was totally thinking of like Appalachia TikTok. If you see a dog in the woods.
Right, it's got three eyes. All right, for chapter 19, we open up with the Iron Gate card. As soon as the scene opens up, there's a fray. The group has come across destriers, the king's destriers, and they get into a kerfuffle.
They're staked out because they're thinking that they're just gonna get this card from Pine and it's gonna be really easy because he's gonna be traveling. Maybe he'll have like one or two companions with him. But for some reason or other, he's with destriers. Not only is he with destriers, he's with Hoth Rowan and her dad.
Right. In the mayhem of the fight, she finds herself running, but comes into a fight with her father. And so she starts fighting him, and she's asking the nightmare for strength. And so she's saved by the nightmare's strength. And then Jesper drops her charm and is immediately overcome with these strange feelings of trying to go deeper into the mist. We get a description of Hoth Rowan, but he immediately disappears into the mist. And so do the destriers. Somehow, without using a card, they're all just gone. And Elspeth is looking for them, and she's very confused. She turns around, and within a second, Hoth is upon her and reaches out. He's yelling at her, asking her who she is, and breaks her arm. It is at that time that the nightmare slashes Hoth, lacerations that go up his neck and onto his jaw. As we know, the nightmare has a real problem with the Rowans, and so the text changes, and we know that we're listening to the nightmare speak. It's italicized and it's rhyming. And so it says, the berry of Rowans is red, always red. The earth at its trunk is dark with bloodshed. But a prince is a man, and a man may be bled. He came for the girl and got the monster instead. And I love that.
He's so sassy.
So sassy. They regroup and realize Elspeth fought her dad, and they're all pretty scared about that. And everyone feels just really weird about that. The chapter ends and they don't talk about it any further, but they're all looking at her really strange. And that is because her father was the captain of the destriers, and how did she best him? They're trying to figure that out.
And also, she maimed Hoth like in this crazy way without a weapon.
Yeah. So chapter 20 opens up, and Raven is kind of catching on to Elspeth. All those curling lip moments are amounting to something. He feels a stillness about her, a darkness. They flirt a lot in this chapter, and he finally admits that pretending to court her is actually not that hard. That's pretty much the most that we get out of it, though. Ione and Hoth show up randomly at Castle U. Ione is definitely being turned by the maiden card, but I also feel like we didn't know a lot about her from the beginning, besides that she's my favorite cousin trope. And I feel like there could be something more to her. Right now, they're kind of on the outs, but I feel like there's this connection between them. Elspeth mentions that Ione doesn't have her card on her.
I think the reason why she points that out is because Ione's clearly using the magic, but she doesn't have it on her. So, yeah. As we know, the more you use the magic, the more it takes from you. And so if you don't have it on you, you can't just turn it off whenever you want.
Yeah. So it's just like sucking from her the whole time. At one point, Hoth bumps Elspeth's arm and notices that Elspeth is hurt and then asks where Jesper is. Jesper is also missing. So definitely Hoth is putting things together, but they play it cool. They comment on how the injury on Hoth is unbelievable and also that they think that a man must have done this to Hoth. When Hoth mentions that he broke the attacker's wrist, Elm and Raven instinctively look at Elspeth. Ione also turns her head just a fraction of a turn in Elspeth's direction, but not as obvious. So we're all starting to figure each other out. Hoth is running hot pretty much 24/7, so he challenges Elm and has to fight Raven in what seems to be a little fight in the yard of Castle U. Raven breaks Hoth's hand and beats him fairly easily. Afterward, Raven tells Elspeth that Hoth is the one who told the king about Raven's infection, but the king made Raven the captain of the Destriers anyway, which is probably what fuels the rivalry between Hoth and Raven, because Hoth is so outwardly against the infected and his dad went and made Raven the captain of the Destriers.
Chapter 22 starts out with Raven wanting to show Elspeth something. He takes her back to that strange stone room at the edge of the cemetery that they'd seen earlier, the one with the one dark window that the nightmare was urging Elspeth to go towards. They enter through the window, and Elspeth sees there's a big, broad slab of stone in the middle of the room, and she immediately recognizes it from the dream. Raven explains that he used to play in this room as a child, and we learn 3 important things. 1, the stone slab opens if you put infected blood on it, revealing a chamber where the Yu family hide their Providence card. And Raven found both the nightmare card and the mirror card in there when he was a kid. 2, we learn that every year Raven loses the ability to use another card. And 3, we learn that Elm is loyal to the Yu family because his father really never cared for him much, and after his mother died, he was left on his own, and Hoth brutalized him. So one day Raven took him home to Castle Yu, and they all just became a family. Raven and Elspeth share their first kiss, and it's everything we'd hoped for. But when she opens her eyes for a second, she sees a yellow-eyed knight sitting on the slab, and he tells to her, "Elspeth Spindle, let me out." And I actually laughed out loud in this moment because I feel like this 500-year-old monster simply cannot exist inside of the head of a 20-year-old girl any longer.
Please. It's the picking the flower leaves. Like, he loves me not. And he's just like, let me out.
But seeing this apparition totally freaks out Elspeth. So she pulls away and she's like, "I'm so sorry, I've got to go." And she scurries off back to the castle.
I feel like Raven would feel the same way if, he knew.
Right? And Raven's just sitting there like, shit, what did I do?
What?
But she's arguing with the nightmare, demanding to know who this knight is and why she keeps seeing him. And she once again notices the carpet in her room, the one with the knight on it. But then she notices an object off in the background. It's a doorless chamber with one dark window. And I got full body chills.
Right. Yeah. I've gotten full body chills a couple times. It's the rhyming and the dark
Yeah.
gothic is just, there's something so
So good.
creepy. Yeah.
Our girl starts connecting some puzzle pieces, and she guesses that the nightmare is actually the Shepherd King. To which the nightmare replies, in a voice louder than ever, "Finally, my darling Elspeth, we understand one another." And the chapter ends.
Yeah. I do love him.
Me too. Okay, chapter 23 starts off with Elspeth being woken up by Philip Willow out in the field. It turns out she's been sleepwalking, which is new. Philip is the physician who's been working with the Yus, and he found her on his morning walk, so he takes her back to the castle, gives her his cloak, and rebandages her wrist. While Philip helps her, they talk about the past and the old Book of Alders. Essentially, the people used to revere the spirit of the woods, but after the first Rowan king stole the throne from the infected king, he twisted his words until they became weapons against those infected, and people began to fear the spirit of the woods. So she, the spirit, created the mist to forcefully bring people back to her.
And that's why the nightmare hates the Rowans so much. And, well, the Shepherd King, now that we know, hates the Rowans so much. And also why he's so good at reciting the Book of Alders, because he wrote it.
Yes. When she leaves Philip's room, she starts having an argument with Nightmare, and she comes to understand that her degeneration means that every time she asks for the Nightmare/Shepherd King's help, He becomes stronger and she fades a little, which is definitely bad news. Bad news.
Scary.
She's headed back to her rooms when she runs into Elm, who takes a look at her dirty dress and the cloak she's wearing, and he's like, girl, go get changed. It's a market day and we're going shopping.
And getting drunk.
Yes. Chapter 24. It's market day and the gang is all here. We've got Raven, Vesper, Elm, Elspeth, Oth, and Ione. Everyone is wearing masquerade masks, which I guess is a market day tradition and apparently like a romanticy tradition. There has to be at least some scene or ball or character or court that wears a mask. Yes. But Elspeth is looking stunning in a deep red dress with a gold spindle tree engraved on the chest. The dress had belonged to her mother, and Elspeth inherited it after her death. She also decides to put the rose that Raven had picked for her in her hair. I don't know if we mentioned it earlier, but they had this like little moment where she was looking at a rose, she was making herself like a little flower crown, and he picked a rose for her. So it's the next day, and she's wearing that in her hair. When Jesper and Elspeth approach the boys, Hoth tries to flirt with Elspeth and says he doesn't know what Elspeth sees in Raven, and her reply is, he's very tall, which is kind of funny because it makes Hoth stand up a little straighter, but he's still not as tall as Raven. But Hoth grabbed her injured wrist to talk to her a little bit more. He clearly sees her flinch and asks again if there's something wrong with her arm. But before she can respond, Ione slides between them and tells Hoth to be careful with Elspeth because she fell off a horse while they were riding together the other morning. So thanks for the assist.
Right.
And we're given the impression that Hoth and Ione really do not care for each other. There's this undertone that they really kind of actively dislike each other. But the group kind of disperse and they all go off to shop. I wanted to mention that oftentimes everybody dresses in their house colors. And so the Spindle house, their house color is this like dark red. And then they often have like their family crest will be whatever tree they're named after. So I think that's such a cute idea. You know what I mean?
It's very cute. I feel like I would be so lost. I'd be like, what tree is that again?
Right.
Yes.
But
You
would pick it
Willow.
up. Yeah, you'd pick it up really quick, I'm sure.
Right.
Like if
It's the
everybody.
currency of last names. Yeah.
Yeah, and then it's like red spindle, like, you know.
Right. Yeah.
But Elspeth gets the idea to go to her father's house to look for his well card. But Elm tells her to cool her jets. They need to appear to be just like everybody else, stay under the radar. She asks Elm if he thinks that Hoth is connecting the dots about her wrist, and he tells her that Hoth isn't as smart as he thinks he is. But it was kind of funny because during that scene where she's like, oh, she just fell off the horse, Elspeth is like draining of all color and like Elm like kind of like steers her away and is like, get that look off your face. What are you doing? Elspeth is bad at like lying and like hiding things.
Yeah. And I just think it's so interesting, the relationship between Elm and Hoth, because you really wouldn't get the idea that they were brothers. You get this feeling like Hoth did something so unforgivable to Elm that he doesn't even really consider him family anymore. And so he talks about Hoth as if he's like the lowest, trashiest guy in the room at all times. And nobody comes to Hoth's defense. You kind of just get this idea, like Tess was saying about there's definitely something going on between Ione and Hoth. There's definitely undertones of like domestic violence, and that would be right in with Hoth and the violence that he's showing.
I agree. A little bit later, Raven and Elspeth have a cute moment alone in the crowd where he admits to being obsessed with her since the first time that they met on the forest road, and he's been having some quote unquote wicked thoughts about her. Nightmare is in her head like, tell him how you feel, you're running out of time.
Yeah, it's interesting how the Nightmare's voice has changed ever since he's been like introduced, and it seems like he's really on board with the group going and finding and trying to unite the deck. It seems like he's really coming out of his shell, making more funny jokes and like being like, I like him about certain people.
Right. He's just like a little sassy old man, kind of.
Yeah.
But Raven also tells her it's not safe to get close to him. He's a liar, a traitor, and the highwayman always meets the hangman. And I'm wondering why they're all having such risky conversations out in the open. Like, guys, this is not the time.
Right. Yeah.
Market day, really?
Would people walk around with like cards that can do magical things?
Right. Someone could be invisible right now.
Right. Yeah.
But I guess Elspeth would be able to see that.
That's true. Yeah.
But then Elspeth tells him that they are the reckoning. They're the change that's coming, and they're what the king should fear. And it's giving very much Aelin Galthinius, and I'm here for that.
Yes.
Then they're interrupted by her father, stepmother, and the twins. Her father looks about to cry, and he tells her that she looks just like her mother in that dress, which stepmom definitely isn't thrilled about. And then the two twins sweep Elspeth away to chirp and twitter about their concerns that Raven will turn her in if he finds out that she's infected. Elspeth gets an idea, and she gets Elm and his scythe card to help her send the girls off on their merry way in search of some wine. Then Elm and Elspeth have a little combo. Basically, Elm tells Elspeth that when Raven looks at her, he feels like he knows her, like he sees himself in her and he wants to help her and people like her. Elm, on the other hand, sees something different. He sees someone who is hiding something. There's no way she should have been able to overpower him and Raven that night. And also, she straight up mauled his brother without a weapon. He also mentions her eyes being black, but in certain light, they're yellow. The math just is not mathing. And again, why have this convo in public? It's
Right.
beyond me. Like,
Right.
what are you
Yeah.
doing?
Yeah. But it's obvious that like Elm, has been raised not to trust people, knowing that there's something that they could be hiding and like taking in all the details and then making an assumption. Whereas Raven, you can see he's been hiding so much that he knows what it looks like when someone else is hiding. And so he's been a little bit more understanding, it seems like.
I think that's such a good point. And again, at this moment, Nightmare is in her head like, let me out. He's already seen me. Let me talk to him. And she's like, no, stop. They're my eyes. And he's like, are they? You asked for me and now I'm here. There's no going back, babe. Everything comes at a price. And she's arguing with Nightmare in her head, and Elm is standing there like, hello? But then she's knocked aside by a few destriers because they found an infected child and arrested them and their parents. And Hoth wants to make an example out of them. And I'm getting the feeling that the next chapter is going to be a dark one.
Yes.
Here we go. I do love this juxtaposition of like the comedic relief between like all of these like heavier scenes though.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely. It's got light moments and dark moments. And I think it's really good at hiding the details in both sides. And so I think she's building a really detailed story that she's going to drop some things for us later, I think.
So the parents are brought forth in front of the crowd. They're tied by their wrists and they're already bloodied. The man is whipped while Hoth shouts about how the only true magic is the cards and that everything else is sickness. Hoth says that they will find every infection, every degeneration, any person harboring someone with the illness, and they will be snuffed out, and he sentences these parents to death. The crowd is eerily silent. No one seems to enjoy this brutality, but everybody is too afraid to stop it. Elspeth is not doing well, and Elm puts his arm on her elbow to kind of steady her. She's urging him to do something, and he's kind of looking around for Raven. The destriers move the entire crowd to the outskirts of the town to witness as the parents are forced to walk into the mist using Hoth's scythe card. But first, the child, who's a boy no older than 12, is brought forward by the physicians in order to witness his parents going into the mist. It's emotional, it's dark, and the scene is very heavy. Elspeth asks Elm for his cloak and his mask, which she puts on to conceal her identity because she knows she has to do something, but she's just not sure what. She's not like a Jude Doherty level of schemer. She's not like an Aelin planner so far. She's more of like an act first, think later. I'm just gonna get Nightmare to help me and we'll figure it out sort of a girly.
She has very detailed, escalating conversations in her mind.
Elspeth is freaking out and she's begging Elm to do something, and he does. He uses his scythe card to have his parents stop walking, which pisses Hoth off, obviously. And Elm is kind of like playing this, like this whole thing is his stage, and he walks forward, like, even for you, this is too far. And so now these two are kind of going head to head, magic versus magic. Elm is causing quite the scene when Lyndon, one of Hoth's men, lunge at him. He uses his scythe to stop him, but Elspeth notices Elm's nose starting to bleed from the strain. Meanwhile, Elspeth is sneaking closer and closer to the boy and the physicians when all of a sudden Raven and Jesper show up on the scene, blades drawn. This distraction gives Hoth the moment he needs to slam his elbow into Elm's face, which causes him to lose his focus, and so the parents, crying, screaming, pleading, walk into the mist. Raven barks some orders at his men, and now it is truly chaos, with the destriers infighting, some for Raven and some for Hoth, which causes the crowd to panic and disperse because they're no longer required to be there and they don't want to get caught up in the violence that is quickly unfolding. Elspeth asks for Nightmare's help and he takes over. She gets the boy away from the physicians, but as they're trying to make a run for it, she realizes that Lyndon is locked in on them and he's coming for her. And so she takes the child's hand and they run into the mist. Again, full body chills.
Yeah. Yeah, that was such a good scene.
As they're running, Elspeth gets a strange vision. Suddenly, the sky's dark. There's a fire burning in the distance. She still has the boy following her, but there are also lots of other children, all looking terrified, and she feels an overwhelming need to protect them and get them to safety. She turns and sees an old ancient building underneath a yew tree. It's one dark window calling to her.
Yeah, yeah, so good.
So good.
Yeah, when the children like joined her, I was like, what is happening? What is happening? Yeah, it was so
Yeah.
cool.
The boy cries out, "Miss!" And she trips over her skirt and she falls, which shakes her back to the present moment. The boy tells her he can hear his parents, and Nightmare tells her that Lyndon is really close and she can't outrun him with the kid. Elspeth gives her charm to the child and tells him to run and find his parents and take them the charm. She tells him that the spirit of the woods doesn't harm people like them and she'll be fine without it. So off he goes. Elspeth describes herself as being hunched over, listening as Lyndon approaches. Her hands are curled and shaped like claws, and Nightmare is running the show. Lyndon launches at her, sword pointed at her throat, but the Nightmare is too fast and too strong. Elspeth kind of blacks out, but she comes back and she hears a scream. She tells Nightmare to stop, but it's too late. Lyndon is clutching his neck with blood pouring through his fingers. Elspeth begins to run away when she runs into another destrier, and she's trying to push him away when she realizes that it's Raven. She's safe. She's out of breath and explaining that she doesn't really know what happened, and Raven tells her that her eyes are yellow. Raven moves to take her hand, but he looks down at them and he recoils when he realizes that her hands are curled like claws and covered in blood. And the chapter ends.
Yes, that is exactly the premonition that Emery had about Elspeth when he first met her.
Yep. I see your hands pale and
Yeah,
covered in blood.
yeah, long, slender, pale, and covered in blood.
It's
So
almost like
something's
someone
happening.
planned this.
Yeah.
It's almost like someone had a detailed outline of how it would go and left us Easter eggs. Chapter 26. Raven keeps his cool and wipes the blood off of Elspeth's hands onto his dark tunic. He asks her what happened and who she injured, and she tells him about it and that it was Lyndon. She also lets him know that the boy's gone, he's somewhere in the woods. Raven calls some of his men to attend the injured and another one to retrieve Lyndon. He's really hopping into Captain of the Destriers mode. He's taking control of the situation. Raven asks her about the yellow in her eyes, and she tells him that she can't talk about that and that if he knew, he wouldn't want anything to do with her. Which he replies something like, "Then you think really little of me if you think that."
Yeah, I agree with that. That's not fair.
Yeah. And also, like, come on, he's the Shepherd King. Maybe he could communicate with everybody and be part of the
Right.
conversation, but like, that's
Yeah,
maybe just
yeah.
me.
She's so scared that it's happening that she doesn't realize how valuable it is.
Right. Raven has her take off her mask and her cloak and instructs her to be just a maiden who got lost in the mist. And then they head back down to town for Raven to start hammering down on the dissent that Hoth is trying to sow in his men. Raven takes back control, but things are definitely tense, especially between him and Hoth. And he instructs his men not to let anyone into the city gates without an inspection and to report it to him immediately. He also says that if the boy is not found, just to let the mist have him, which is also kind of has a double meaning because we also know that Raven obviously knows that the mist won't affect the boy because he's infected. Right. Meanwhile, Elm is really not doing well. His breathing is ragged. He's kind of trailing behind them, and more blood is pouring from his nose. But the gang has to get back to Castle U ASAP because Raven just spoke to his father telepathically, and it turns out that Emery has run away from Stone, which is the king's castle, and he's currently at Castle U. Chapter 27 starts back at Castle U. Emery is laying in the library wrapped up in blankets and next to a roaring fire. His lips are blue and he is quote unquote bone cold from walking all night to get back home. Even though Elm is clearly not doing well, Moret Yu, the matriarch of the family, asks Elm to use his scythe to help Emery warm up, which he does. Emery wakes up, but he doesn't remember meeting Elspeth. He says he can't quite make out her face, which I thought was really ominous and interesting.
Right. Yeah.
And Emery asks Elm and Raven if she's a friend. Emery tells Elspeth she's beautiful, especially with her dark black eyes, almost as if the Shepherd King penned her himself.
That entire exchange was so creepy. If something about Emery's premonitions is very creepy. The entire Yu family.
Yeah, spooky ooky.
Yeah, definitely.
He then goes on to explain his theory that the Yus are actually descendants of the Shepherd King, because stone was built by the first Rowan king, meaning that the Shepherd King would have had to have lived somewhere else, and that there are no other grand castles in Blunder except for the ruins that are on the grounds of Castle Yu. He goes on to explain that the ruins aren't even the oldest thing in Blunder, the trees are. And at the time, the king would have taken the name of the trees like everyone else around him. And what trees are planted around the ruins? They're yews. Elspeth asks Nightmare, so good, right?
Yeah.
Elspeth asks Nightmare what his name was, and he snaps at her, "My name is Ash, lost to the winds." And at first I was like, oh my gosh, sassy pants. But on second thought, I was kind of wondering, wouldn't it be funny if Ash was his actual name? Because Ash is
Right.
also another type of tree.
Yeah, and it was like a who's on second kind of
Yeah,
joke,
right.
like
My name is
randomly in the
Ash.
middle.
Yeah, exactly. Who's on second? Oh my god. But then Elm pipes up, saying that now is the time where Emery reminds them all that the Rowans, aka Elm's family, blood family, came in and destroyed the Shepherd King's castle. To which Emery replies that it's an easy assumption to make, as the Rowan history is full of violence, and they were the first people to kill those that were infected. Elm argues that they united the people of Blunder by offering them a safer sort of magic with the Providence cards, and Emery replies, by killing everyone and everything that couldn't be controlled by their scythes.
Because it makes, right? The king doesn't want this like unruly type of magic that he doesn't have any control over.
Exactly. Raven decides Emery can stay the night, but the following morning he has to go back to Stone, which no one is really happy about. Later at dinner, Elm confronts Raven about the events of Market Day, saying that it would have been a perfectly good time to sneak into the Spindle House and steal the card. To which Elspeth is like, bro, what? That was my idea the whole time. And Elm also says that there's going to be hell to pay when they get back to Stone. Elspeth maimed a destrier. There was a failed arrest of an infected child that was very public, and it's going to be really messy. He also brings up again that he doesn't trust Elspeth and that her magic is more than just seeing Providence cards. Raven says that he trusts her, and then that should be enough. And Elm is like, okay, so I can't have my own opinion? Or does everyone just need to bow to the captain? Which, yikes, it seems like Raven's control is really slipping.
Right. And I think that they can see him like falling for her. And so they're like questioning if that's the reason why he's trusting her just because he likes her.
Right. Also, towards the end of this book, Elm felt so much like a dejected lover. Like, are you in love with Raven? Do you know what I mean? Like, bro,
Right. He's such
chill.
a third. Yeah. He's such a third wheel in like every scene.
But Raven explains that he wanted all of them to be seen that day at Market Day because the Ivies had actually snuck into Spindle House to search for the wall card. But unfortunately, they didn't succeed, which sets Elspeth off because obviously she would have been helpful there, but the gang is all kind of just arguing with each other. Jesper returns at nightfall and gives the lowdown. The boy and his parents have not been found, and Lyndon is alive, but barely. The night wears on, and most of the members of the family go to sleep, except Elspeth, Raven, Elm, and Fenrir, who is Raven's dad. But the tension in the room is very high between Elspeth and Raven, so the other men are like, oh, right, well, that's my cue, good night, leaving the two of them alone. Elspeth asks Raven if he truly trusts her, and they share a tender moment with her admitting that she's degenerating and changing. And that's the reason why she attacked that destrier, and he's clearly concerned and moves closer. She tells him she still can't explain her degeneration to him, and T tells her he understands, that they both have secrets they're forced to keep, but something is pulling them together, and they just need 2 more cards and she'll be free. Things start getting hot and heavy in the study when they hear some clattering and footsteps hurrying away outside of the door, and they figure it was probably Thistle, who was back to like refill their drinks. Thistle is the butler at Castle U, and they just hear like clattering and he's like running away, so he probably opened the door and is like, oh, okay, never mind. And that kind of makes Raven curse under his breath. So he takes Elspeth to his room for a little bit of some bow chicka wow wow time is what I wrote. And the scene is honestly really steamy without being like super overly explicit in my humble opinion. But I know you have like an anecdote about hearing it for the first time in public.
Yeah, I was in a large warehouse store when I heard this, and I was listening to it on Audible. And there's a very distinctive part where Raven asks Elspeth if he can kiss her. And I was not expecting the response. Elspeth says, yes, but it's a little late to ask. And then Raven's response back to that was a very big, oh my gosh, pause, where am I? Everyone's looking at me kind of moment. And then I paused and nothing was happening and I was just in a store. But it was a really good scene. Yeah, I really liked the way that one was written.
Me too. But the chapter ends with Elspeth falling asleep, listening to his beating heart, which she describes as stretching on and on and on, an eternal beat of false promise. And she thinks that she feels as though all of her problems would just be solved if she could just stay there like this with him forever. Like she has, quote unquote, all of the time in the world. And if I've learned anything from reading any romantasy, it's that whenever a character feels like they have all the time in the world with someone, the illusion is quickly shattered, and I was scared.
Yeah, it's probably the beginning of the end right there.
Yes. I'll Tell Him Tomorrow is another one that's like,
Another,
no, please
yeah,
don't.
please don't.
Chapter 28 starts out with Elspeth thinking she has successfully snuck out of Raven's bedroom in the early morning hours, only wearing her undergarments, but surprise! Jasper's there, and she is grinning ear to ear. I'm not the sister.
I love the sister.
Elspeth is like, you didn't hear anything, right? And Jasper's like, hear, like what? And Elspeth is like, never mind. And she pushes into her own room and gets ready for breakfast.
They're
At
so
breakfast,
cute.
I love this scene so
Yeah.
much. At breakfast, everyone is seated. Fenrir and Moret are fussing over Emery. Elm looks like he's slept in a windstorm. And Jesper can't keep the smile off of her face every time she looks at Elspeth. And then Raven saunters into the room looking smug as hell. It's too funny. He's like fussing with people's head, like grabbing a bite off someone else's plate. He's big man on campus. Yeah. Now Elma's like, what is up? Why are you smiling, Raven? It's so unnerving. And Jesper like breaks out laughing. And then Elspeth kicks Jesper under the table, which makes her laugh more. And Elma's like looking around at everybody, and he puts it all together, and he just like and he claims to lose his appetite all of a sudden.
Yeah, and he has to go. The classic third wheel response.
So all of this is happening, this kind of cute, funny, cozy chaos, when all of a sudden Emery starts coughing up blood, which really darkens everyone's mood immediately. And they all remember that Emery needs to go back to Stone. Jasper readies the carriage while the rest of the group takes a walk through the gardens, which is what Emery requested to do before going back. Raven pulls Elspeth under a willow tree, and he checks in with her, asking why she left before he got up. She tells him that she wanted to let him rest, to which he replies, I don't want rest. I want you. Guys, it's cute. It's so cute.
It is. I really like them.
Me too.
Raven's like calm and gentle. I like that.
And then they kiss. And right on cue, Emery peeks into the willow tree and he lets everybody know that he found them and that they were kissing. And I really appreciated the levity after that whole like super brutal chapter, because that chapter was hard.
Yeah, I really like the dynamic of the Yu family. They've got so many different characters. It makes you feel like you're at home.
Yeah, it's not quite a found family. It kind of is.
Yeah.
But she definitely writes her characters really well. But Elspeth leaves Elm and Raven to bicker, and she goes to speak with Emery. She tells him that she needs his magic. She needs Emery to touch her again, and for Emery to tell her what he sees, which the nightmare is really not happy about.
Mm-hmm.
But Emery holds Elspeth's hand and says he sees her, and also a creature, not a man, not an animal, but something in between, that stands in the room that it built for the spirit of the wood, perched on a tall, dark stone, and that it wrapped around her spine as if woven into her. She asks if he sees the Shepherd King, the knight in the gold armor, and he says that he does not. which could point to your theory that we'll get to at the end of this episode. So Elspeth asks Emery what the creature says, and on page 321, Emery's hands shook. When he spoke, his voice was strange, slippery. There once was a girl, he said, clever and good, who tarried in shadow in the depths of the wood. There was also a king, a shepherd by his crook, who reigned over magic and wrote the old book. The two were together, so the two were the same. He did not have to say the rest. I knew it by heart. The girl, the king, I breathed. The nightmare's voice burned through my mind, and the monster they became.
Like full body chills down the whole side. What is it about creepy rhyming?
Right? It's like, don't tell me your riddles.
Exactly, get out of here. But it shows like spending a lot of time thinking about something, I think, which kind of can creep you out.
Indeed. But Emery comes out of his daze and he's crying, asking Elspeth why her eyes are yellow. And Elspeth feels really terrible for asking this young boy to go through that. And she thinks about what a burden his magic must be for him. But then Raven calls to them and tells them that it's time to go. Elspeth asks Emery not to say anything to the others, and he tells her that the good thing about his degeneration is that he, quote, always forgets his nightmares.
Oof.
Elspeth wants to tell him that she can save him. She can find the cards and save both of them. But in her heart, she's tired of pretending. So she just stands there saying nothing, but feeling her spine hunch a little as the nightmare curled its claws around her.
That was so creepy.
Yeah.
Our girl's being possessed.
Yes, slowly. And that leads us to part 3, the blood. And we're actually going to have to stop again, so we'll see you on another day. Probably going to put this all in one video, but yeah, see you later. All right, and we are back. It's another day. Through the magic of video editing, this is all going to be one video for you. But we are ready to dive into part 3, the blood. But Sarah, go ahead and take us away.
All right, we are on chapter 29, and when we come into the chapter, Elspeth has just woken up, and she is in the little room with one dark window when she wakes up. She's like asking the nightmare, like, why have you brought me here? And the nightmare says something like, I needed to see something, and there's dirt. She looks down and there's dirt and rocks on her hands, under her nails, and it looks like she's been digging, which honestly gave me serious chills. I don't know, something about not knowing that you're digging in the dirt was terrifying me. She realizes at that same time that the rock that the nightmare has been perched upon all of this time is actually a gravestone, and the nightmare is getting stronger. Elspeth is going mad, and the nightmare is taking over, but the nightmare defends his position by saying, who took care of you when the physicians came to your uncle's door? When the destriers came for your throat, who fell them to the ground? And so even though the nightmare realizes that he's taking over Elspeth and that she's wasting away, he still defends his position at this time. Then he says, you have so little time, Elspeth. And she's like, what the hell does that mean? And then he just disappears. It's Naya and Dimia's name day, so they are celebrating. And Elspeth accidentally gets caught by Elm reciting the old Book of Alders. She's been doing that a lot lately. She's been speaking in rhyme and reciting a lot of the parts of the Book of Alders that Elm is familiar with, that everyone is familiar with, because it's sort of become a childhood bedtime story that everyone's familiar with. And Elm has something to say that's interesting at the end of this chapter, and so I just wanted to say it here. He talks about how twins always give him the creeps. And I've been noticing throughout the book that there's a lot of discussion of twins, like the twin elders, and then, of course, Elspeth's sisters. So we've made it to chapter 30, and chapter 30 opens up with the well card. And it says to be wary of the blue. Elm and Elspeth are in her dad's study looking for the well card, and they hear some noises and turn around and they see their father's steward has caught them in her father's study. They kind of like quickly try to make up the ground, and the steward could be suspicious, but he's mostly just in awe to see the king's son there alone in the dark with Elspeth. Later in the chapter, Hoth shows up and he brings out the chalice card and tells everyone that they're going to play a game of chalice truth.
Yeah, that was so fascinating to see that the chalice among these certain circles is kind of something that they use so casually, just like a childhood game that they used to play together. But definitely we can tell that the stakes are a lot higher. And really quick before we go further, just to backtrack a little bit, You mentioned that we found out that the stone in the one dark window, or in the room with the one dark window, is actually a tombstone, but we actually find out whose tomb that is. I don't know if you touched on that.
Oh, yeah, maybe I have a little bit to touch on that. But yes, we find out that it's actually the tomb of the Shepherd King.
Yes.
Yes, the Shepherd King's tomb. Very big. Yes, so Hoth shows up. He says that we're going to play a game of Chalice Truth, and he brings out the card where the rules of the game are fairly simple. Everyone gets to ask one question of each person, and each person has to answer a question from everyone who's playing. They all have to play, and honestly, right when they started doing this, I was really excited. I love this game. I love a truth-telling game. It's definitely my type of fun. The game is really intense. Everyone is on the edge of their seats and choosing each of their words very carefully, because you can get out of the questions if you accidentally make them a yes or no question or something simple. There are ways to get out of it. So the things that we learn from the game include that Hoth is using the scythe card on Ione regularly. Raven is no longer pretending to court Elspeth. He kisses her in front of everyone. And we learned that Elm hates Stone because his brother abused him as a child and he was sent away to live with the Yews. So he hates Stone Castle. Ione asks Hoth if he has cheated on her, and we find out he has. It's Elspeth's turn finally, and Ione is one of the first people to ask. She asks if Elspeth is in love with Raven, and Elspeth immediately says yes, but feels betrayed by Ione, which I thought was a really interesting exchange. I was still kind of like trying to figure out where Ione is coming from at this point, what she's up to. Hoth goes next, and he asks Elspeth how she hurt her arm. Ione tries to intervene, which I loved, and Elspeth is overcome by the card and scared. So Raven, trying to calm her fears, decides that he's going to use the nightmare card to go into her mind to help her through this, maybe to help her lie, come up with a good lie. And he enters her mind, but once he does, she's standing there freaking out. She tells him to know that he has to leave right away. And he's just...
Yeah, he's really compounded.
She's like, get out of my mind. and
yeah, and Raven's really like compounding the problem here. Elspeth is already freaking out, and she's like,
yeah, and she's like trying to push him out, but then he's trying to console her, and then the nightmare lunges out of the darkness at Raven, and Raven falls out of his real chair in the real world.
As you would.
Yeah. Everyone is looking shocked at Raven, but Raven looks the most shocked to find a monster in Elspeth's head. Elspeth won't answer him, and she won't answer Hoth's question. So the chalice's effect starts to begin on her. She feels bile in her throat and she barfs. The chalice's ill effect is like poison, and she needs the antidote. The barf she sees on the ground is dark and it's got dirt in it. And she realizes that it's the soil that she's been digging up from the chamber.
I hate it.
I was so disturbed by these like couple chapters. The morning that she wakes up. During the commotion, though, Ione taps the chalice card, freeing Elspeth, and walks out of the chamber. So Elspeth is relieved and no longer barfing mud.
Gross.
So Elspeth sort of passes out and just doesn't want to be cognizant anymore, so she leaves us. And she's asleep, but listening to Raven tell Elm what he saw in Elspeth's head. They're standing over her bed. Raven thinks he is going crazy, and the nightmare asks Elspeth while she's laying there if she's going to let him continue to suffer like that or say something. She wakes up. Raven asks her what that voice was in her head, and Elm is all eyes and ears at this point. He's like leaning in. She decides she's going to show him instead of tell him, which I didn't think was particularly a good idea, but he taps the nightmare card 3 times, and the nightmare is actually quite polite in this moment, comes out of the darkness, says hi, and she explains in this moment that it's her magic. I can absorb whatever the Shepherd King paid for that card. And so she explains that he is the one who can actually see the cards and that she sees it through his eyes.
I feel like there's this popular thing that happens in a lot of these fantasy books where our main character wakes up, but they don't open their eyes. So they can just observe the world around them before the people around
Yeah.
them are conscious. I feel like I need to train myself to do that.
I know. This is me when I wake up. Just
Yeah.
like immediately, like, and I see people even in like dreamy movies where they wake up on their bed and they like stretch their arms and like caress their pillow or something. I'm just like sitting up. I'm literally just sitting up and I'm already like, I'm looking at my
I'm back.
phone or something. Yeah, I've woken up.
I'm back. I'm conscious. What are we doing?
The sky's awake, so I'm awake. That's me before 8 a.m. at home. As we know, the Shepherd King bartered animals for some cards, he bartered objects for others, and when he made the Nightmare card, he bartered a part of himself. She realizes the Nightmare is the Shepherd King at the same time as the reader does, and Elm does too, right as they're describing the situation, and so he is very scared. Elm is very scared, angry, and shocked. Raven looks shocked and scared too. Elm puts together that's how she survived against her father. He put that together right away, which was very smart, and how she hurt Hoth and maimed Lyndon. And he's kind of like yelling at this point when Raven and Elspeth are the ones that are trying to stay calm. And so Raven sends Elm away, and Elspeth tells him why she never told him. And she begins at first just oddly quoting the Book of Alders when Elm leaves. Raven asks, "Why didn't you tell me, Elspeth?" And Elspeth replies, "I know what I know. My secrets are deep, but long have I kept them, and long will they keep."
Yeah,
It's
her just kind of riddling.
Yeah,
Yeah, she's
full.
just, yeah. It's that slow kind of descent of like the two merging together, and like we're hearing the things that Nightmare tells Elspeth all the time, like now coming out of Elspeth's mouth, and she's saying them to other people. It's so unnerving.
Yeah, and like how she'll slip into these rhythmic rhymes and you're suddenly like you think you're hearing an answer from Elspeth when suddenly you realize that you're listening to another part of the Book of Alders again. And then Elspeth begins speaking just as the Nightmare himself. He's been growing stronger. Raven asks if the Nightmare has ever hurt Elspeth, and the Nightmare responds that he is the one that protects her. Creepy. So the king is there suddenly at Spindle House and calls Raven and everyone down. So Raven leaves and leaves Elspeth. Elspeth is supposed to be resting when her father walks in and asks her about Raven. She says that she's very happy with him. I thought this was a great little add-in conversation that I wasn't expecting. Eric says that Elspeth's mom gave him a Providence card when they got married, and it was a well card. And he would like to give the well card to Elspeth.
Yeah,
and it's
I
very
thought that
cute
was so
because,
sweet.
yeah, it's like tied with yarrow, and it's like this very friendly, sweet exchange of like this father giving his daughter sort of like coming of age present, like you've grown up, your mother's no longer here, and here's what she left us.
Meanwhile, for like the last half of the book, she's been scheming to steal it from him, and he has this gesture of like kindness.
Yeah, literally tied with yarrow. I was like, girl. Yes, and so it's this very friendly exchange, and he gives her the well card. She's very excited. Elspeth goes to find Raven. She tells him that she's sorry and that she has the well card. She's so excited. He says that he'll send Philip the physician to retrieve it and take it back to Castle U to keep it all safe. The chapter ends and she says goodbye to him, but the final sentence is that if I had known those would be the last words I'd say to him aloud, I might have chosen them differently. And it's just like the whole floor falls out in the last two sentences because everything comes together. Everything that she wanted, she didn't have to hurt her dad to get the card, and it was just heartbreaking.
There's just that one little word in there that gave me a little bit of saving grace, that allowed, that I was like, okay.
Yes.
Okay. So I don't think
Allowed.
he dies, because I was,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes.
I was
yes.
so worried. I read that sentence like 5 times. I was like, okay.
Yeah. It would be the last words I'd say to him aloud.
Aloud.
I might have chosen them differently. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
you're
so
right.
good.
There was something about that sentence. I was like, no, he's okay. He's okay. And it's right. It's the aloud.
Yeah. All right, here we go.
Here we go. Good luck.
Off we go. We are on chapter 33. Buckle up because things do not get less intense during the stretch of chapters. Philip comes and goes, taking the wall card with him. Elsbeth is weak, but she's also wanting to get up and leave this room that she's been resting in. And all of a sudden, Nightmare lets her know that somebody's coming. The door is pushed open, and Elspeth sees her uncle enter the room, and he's clearly looking for something, and he seems that he's a bit surprised to see her awake. They make a little bit of strained small talk, and then he lets Elspeth know that her aunt is there and that she's waiting to see her up in Elspeth's room. Elspeth is really excited to see her aunt, so she's following her uncle up into her bedroom, but she's realizing that he's not really looking at her. And just the way that this stretch is written, something feels very, very wrong. They make it to her room, and guess who's there? It's not her aunt, it's Hoth. And we later, I know, it's so bad. Jump scare.
Yeah. I was not expecting that at all. I knew he was being weird, but he's kind of been weird. He's been a terrible guy.
Yeah, the ultimate betrayal.
Yeah.
So it's Hoth. And then we also later find out that Hoth didn't even have to use his scythe card on her uncle. Her uncle just gave her up willingly. Great. Hoth dismisses Elspeth's uncle and lets him know that if anybody asks, to tell them that Elspeth is resting and she does not want to be disturbed. So this is just getting worse and worse as the seconds tick on. Even though Elspeth pleads with her uncle not to leave, he exits the room and closes the door behind him without a second glance. A fight ensues, but ultimately Hoth rips strips from her bed sheets so he can tie her down to a chair. Hoth is on to Elspeth, and he suspects that she's the one who scratched his face in the woods. He also suspects that she's infected, and he lets her in on his plan. Essentially, he's going to use her as a little bit of bait so that he can get to Raven, Jesper, and Elm, who he's suspecting of treason. Hoth is really roughing her up, and Elspeth pleads for Nightmare to help her, but Nightmare warns her that she's so near the end of her degeneration that he doesn't know what's going to happen if he takes the wheel over for her again. Elspeth tells him that she's aware and that she needs his help anyway. She's able to rip through the bindings on her wrists while Hoth is distracted by a knock on the door. Ding dong! Orith Willow is here! And he's brought his terrible claw. And then we're hopping over to chapter 34. There's so much blood on the floor that Orith doesn't even need to use his favorite toy to verify that Elspeth is infected. And Elspeth is panicking because she knows her crew is going to be back from the patrol at any minute. Basically, any way you cut it, Raven will go to the gallows, if only for hiding Elspeth's infection. But Nightmare tells her that Raven doesn't need to die and asks if Elspeth trusts Nightmare. To which Elspeth is like, dude, do I even have a choice? And Nightmare's like, you've always had a choice. Questionable.
Yeah, that's really interesting. You've always had a choice. I was surprised by that.
She can hear the house gates echoing, and she knows that they're returning. So it's kind of a now or never sort of a moment, and we're not really sure what the plan is. Another fight ensues, with Elspeth feeling both weak from everything that she's just gone through, and also insanely strong with the Nightmare's power coursing through her veins. Hoth and Orith are like, what is happening? Why is she so strong? They're like, what is her magic? They said she didn't have magic. And they're quickly piecing together that she is much more powerful than either of them were aware of, because she's kind of handing them their asses. But Hoth has had enough and is like, dude, she's just a girl. I'll make her hold still. And he takes her and he whacks her head against the wall so hard that her skull cracks. Things are not looking good for Elspeth. And I didn't mention it earlier, but Raven has been trying to communicate with her telepathically this whole time. Basically, he's like, where are you? And she's like, I'm with Hoth. He's on to you, bestie. Don't come for me. Find the cards. Break the curse.
Yeah. Save us all.
Elspeth's conscience is slowly starting to drift away, with Nightmare telling her that she needs to rest. But she's seeing visions of yellow-eyed children with dark veins pulsing with magic and being thrown into an inferno. Nightmare ends up ripping Orith's arm off, the arm that's wearing the claw, and they use that claw to go straight through Orith's neck, and he's definitely not coming back from that one.
So, it's his tool.
A fitting end.
It is,
Poetic justice, if I ever read it.
Yeah.
Hoth is freaking out, and Elspeth/Nightmare starts saying some really weird stuff to him that really sounds like prophecy, and we all know how much Nightmare loves a little rhyme. So they're attacking Hoth, and at the same time that Elspeth is starting to fade into nothingness, and the last thing they say together is the story of themselves.
Oh, yeah, the king, the girl, and the monster they became.
There you go. So we're on to chapter 35, and it starts out in the dungeon. So it's been 3 nights since the event of the last chapter, and Elsbeth is being held there by the king. We get a little playback of what happened through Raven's perspective. They ran up the stairs to get to her room, broke down the door, found Orth dead, Elspeth unconscious and bleeding, and Hoth is seriously injured, and there seems to be something horribly wrong with his legs.
Oh, sorry, I'm not smiling. It's terrible.
Elspeth comes to and is clearly not really herself, and she doesn't feel any sympathy for what she did to Orith, which, fair. But Elm is a little upset because they were going to use Orith's blood to free Emery, so what's the plan now? Elspeth tells them to call the Destriers and let them know she acted alone, and her eyes are just pure yellow at this point. They're not fading back and forth. Raven is trying to talk into Elspeth's mind, but he's only getting a response from Nightmare, who is telling him that Elspeth is quiet now and she needs to rest. But he also lets Raven know that he's going to help them find the last card. We flash back to present day in the dungeon, and Elm and Raven are conflicted about trusting Elspeth/Shepherd King for good reason. The king comes in with his men to speak to Elspeth because she has refused to speak to anyone else. Elspeth/Shepherd King is speaking in dark prophecy and riddles again, and really kind of giving everybody the creeps. But she offers to help him find the twin elders in exchange for the king releasing Emery to his family, and says that only she can find the card because she was the one who hid it all those years ago. Another chills moment.
Yeah, again, another chills. Yeah.
So, on page 394, this is Elspeth/Shepherd King speaking to the king. The twin elders is hidden in a place with no time, a place of great sorrow and bloodshed and crime. Betwixt ancient trees, where the mist cuts bone deep, the last card remains, waiting, asleep. The wood knows no road, no path through the snare. Only I can find the twin alders, for it was I who left it there.
Finn. Oh, I love it.
What a cliffhanger.
It's also one of those books where you could go back and read it again and be like, all these little things, because you know that she's built so much into it. And that's where the chills come from, is when she's perfectly placed this piece, and you're just like, what pieces? What pieces? And then all of a sudden she places the last piece and you're like, a perfect picture. And it's just so, it's really masterful what she's done. And I love something about how simple the rhymes are. The like, be tarry, don't tarry, be good, be wary, be good, and that kind of thing. It's so simple. It's giving Mother Goose, but it has this undertone of the creeps, that you can get from it. And it's just masterfully done.
Stunning.
10 out of 10. No notes. Okay, so my 2 questions. I think I've already asked them, but I wonder if your answer has changed. And then we should ask them again at the end of Two Twisted Crowns, because I think the answer will change again. So if you could get a hold of any of the cards, which card would you want?
Ooh, so knowing what I know now.
I know.
Can't say it because it's spoilery.
So you're only at the end of One Dark Window, so you don't know.
If I'm only at the end of One Dark Window, I would say, I don't know, the Black Horse seems kind of cool. To just be like strong and fast and like super capable. But then also being able to be invisible, I feel like could come in handy as well.
Right.
I don't know if I'd have much practical uses for either of them.
Yeah, I know. I'm trying to think of what I would want to accomplish in that world and what card I would need to do that. A card that I wouldn't have picked had we not known so much about it, I wouldn't have even looked at it again, was the Nightmare card. But again, I've just enjoyed this concept of a young woman having a nightmare in her head that motivates her, consoles her, strengthens her, tears her down. Like, I think that that's such an obviously relatable analogy to real life that I almost feel like sometimes I have a nightmare in my head, and that it's just so relatable. I think and also I think it takes some of the onerous off of Elspeth when she does something, it's just the nightmare, and I think that would be a great way to also deal with yourself, handle yourself in situations like that, where it wasn't me, it was just the nightmare. in my head that's chasing me down.
Unfortunately,
Um,
I feel like there's some trashy like reality TV show series that I watch, and like every now and then there'll be a person who like gets really drunk and they're like, "Oh, when I get drunk, I'm not Bob, I'm Bobbiana." And it's like kind of this like scapegoat, you know what I mean? Where it's like,
yeah,
"Oh,
yeah.
Bob."
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, and that's kind of what's happening to Elspeth, right? Is that there's a lot of these like outsized problems, like her tearing up half of the trained guard, and them
Right.
being like, "What? How did that happen?" And she's like, "It's not me."
So you think you would pick
Yeah.
the nightmare card?
I think like at this point, I was really interested in the nightmare card and the chalice. I think I was really interested, especially after the truth the truth game. I thought that was really
Right.
fun. Hmm. But I knew at this point that we didn't know enough about all the cards in order to pick. And then what kind of charm would you carry? I think we've talked about this one, but
Ooh, what kind of charm would I carry? I mean, my immediate thought is like a kitty paw, but I hate the fact that it has to be a
yeah.
dead animal, you know?
Yeah, I used to carry around a rabbit paw or whatever,
A
you
little
know, like a
rabbit's foot.
lucky. Yeah, when I
What
was little and it's funny because I think I just like came at the one point I just like came to an age and I was just like, that's a rabbit's foot? And then
so horrible.
it just
Also,
fell off. Maybe it's coming back. Maybe
yeah,
we'll bring it back.
I don't want to bring that back.
Not that
And I
one.
definitely like, I remember when those were everywhere, the little lucky rabbit's foot, and they'd be like dyed in like different
Oh
colors.
yeah, you'd have like a
Like a
pink
blue,
one, a
pink
white
one.
one.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm
the
so glad
cool
that's not a
girls.
thing.
I know. But I think I would, if I could choose, at first I was like, I think I like the horse hair. Like if you had a horse, like that would just be cool to like have like hanging on your purse, like a little
That's true.
horse hair, like ponytail or something.
Yeah.
I thought it would be cool. But then I heard in one of them had a horse tooth. And I
Yeah,
mean,
I think
that's
that's
gotta be like,
Ione's.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's gotta be like this big.
Yeah.
And that one would be kind of cool too, like a horse tooth necklace.
The viper head, but like
Yeah.
still some venom in there so you could also use it as a weapon.
Yeah, that's pretty good. I don't know. I kind of feel like these are pretty cool and I wish that we knew more about them.
Yeah, my immediate thought though, I'm going kitty paw.
I'm kidding. Just immediate.
The
So cute. Hot
beans.
pink. Yeah.
The beans. The beans of
So
protection.
adorable. Well,
But what
very
would
fun.
yours be? What would you choose?
Yeah, I think, like I said, I think I like the horse hair, but the horse tooth was kind of cool. And I also liked the viper head. I thought that was kind of cool. And just any of the bones, I thought. But I just like that concept of like something that is like this equalizer that everybody has to carry with them. And but it's like custom enough that they can like make it their own. I really liked the culture of this fantasy world.
Yeah,
And so I don't know, I just kind of I felt it felt familiar and comfortable. I don't know if
same.
she bases it off of some like ancient culture and that's why it feels comfortable, but yeah, I thought it was just brilliantly done.
That's so good.
Really quick before you go, we wanted to share some theories that we had with you before starting book two. If you don't want to hear these theories, then we'll see you in the next one. Thanks.
Okay, so really quick, one little theory that I have that's I think will play out in the next book is I think that Elm and Ione will somehow end up together. Because I think there's all this subtext that he's like always kind of looking at her, tracking her against across the room, mentioning her. I think that he's into her.
Right. And when there's like sort of scenes where it seems like Hoth is hurting Ione, you can tell that Elm's really against that. And then there's also scenes where, obviously being the crown prince's younger brother, it does put him in line for the throne. And so, I think there's like this maybe hope that someday Elm could move up into the position of being the crown prince or the king or something like that, that he's
Right.
like the reasonable one that's learning how to become the balanced king that he needs to be.
Yes, and also when we had that text about in the beginning of the book where Elspeth is kind of talking about how Ione could potentially be that ruler that would make people less
Right.
afraid of the infection. I think that those two characters are going to end up together.
Right.
But we'll
Ooh,
see.
I like that.
And then the
Yeah.
other theory that I just wanted to touch on really quickly, it's not really my own theory, but it did spur a thought in me. So I saw somebody online talk about the twin alders. They mentioned, what if the twin alders isn't actually a physical card? What if it's a person? What if it's a place? What if it's something else? It's not actually a card. And my first immediate thought was, what if it has something to do with her actual twin sisters because they seem I like maybe they're more than just comedic relief. Maybe there's something deeper there.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, having not seen the Twin Alders card except for the fake, I think there's definitely a lot of room for that theory because we've already been shown a fake one. And so we're looking for a card, but really it could be something else. And how often they find themselves back at that stone in the one dark window room. There's definitely something there, like there could be an object, something's buried there for sure. And
Right.
so, yeah, very interesting. I like that.
And do you have any thoughts? Like, what do you think is going to happen with Elspeth slash Nightmare?
I think that this next book, just given the name, Two Twisted Crowns, it seems like we're going to leave Elspeth behind and take on the Nightmare as the main character animating Elspeth's body. I'm interested by that. I don't really think that I have many theories at this point that I can think of, but I do have something that I hope will happen, and I hope that Elspeth will touch another card because I
Yeah.
want to see what happens when she touches another card. I want to know what happens to the nightmare in her head. Does he take on those characteristics of the card, or is
Ooh,
there going to be another person in her? Will there
you
be
know what
a
I just thought
chalice?
of that I like
Yeah.
actually really hope doesn't happen? Okay, so what if it's kind of like I know not everything can be about Throne of Glass, but also everything is about Throne of Glass, right?
Or is it?
But what if
Let
it's
us
an
know in the comments.
There's a quick Throne of Glass spoiler here, so skip forward a minute if you don't want to hear that. Sorry.
what if it's an Aelin situation and the cards have like what if Elspeth is the physical thing that's needed to bind the cards? What if she needs to physically
Right.
touch all of them and then her infected blood?
Because the king and the maiden and the monster they became, and that whole, like, yeah, I could see that. I could see
Right.
her being the thing that needs to bind them. She physically holds them.
Yeah. And then maybe her spilled infected blood is what releases the mist. And then, on the title it says Maiden, Monster, Martyr, right? But my hope is that we get a happy ending that somehow they work together. Nightmare unites the cards, Blunder is freed, and also Nightmare slash Shepherd King is also freed. He can finally rest.
Right.
And Elspeth maintains autonomy over her own body. She comes back. We have a happy ending that her and Raven end up together. Ione and Elm are guiding the kingdom into like a new bright future. I just don't know. It could get really, really dark,
And
or maybe
super
we'll have like a
cute
happy
babies.
ending.
Yeah, that would be like the most perfect of endings, right? That the nightmare is freed, that the Shepherd King is, exonerated from
Laid to
his,
rest.
yeah.
People can
And
rest.
right, and that the blunder is free from the mist, and everything is saved and nothing is lost.
Yeah. We'll
That'd be
see.
great. That'd be the
We'll
best one.
see. All right. You made it. Did you make it? Did you make it all the way to the end? That is our deep dive plot recap for One Dark Window. And we'd love to know your thoughts. Did you love it? What did you think of this book? Did the ending leave you wrecked?
And are you as curious about Two Twisted Crowns as we are? What are your wildest theories? We seriously want to hear them.
Come find us on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, or YouTube at Basically Bookish Pod and join the conversation. Let's get those dark fantasy theories going.
And if you made it all the way through this episode, drop us a dark Gothic themed emoji like a moon or a key.
Don't forget to follow the pod and leave us a review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. It's the best way to help us reach more readers. If you enjoyed One Dark Window, what other books do you think that someone else who enjoyed this book would like as well? Please let us know in the comment section. We would love for our comments to serve as a sort of resource for other readers.
We'll see you next time. We're going to eagerly jump right into reading Two Twisted Crowns. And until then, happy reading.
Happy reading!